Brought to you from Melbourne, Australia, this is the Badminton Podcast, a community for badminton players by badminton players, where we talk badminton, celebrate local heroes, interview players from all walks of life, and push you to grow as a player and a person. Introducing your hosts, Jeff and Henry.
Welcome to the Badminton Podcast. My name is Henry.
And I'm Jeff.
And we're the co-founders of Volant. And we're here because we love badminton. Thank you so much for joining us. We're so excited to be here with our next episode of our podcast. If you want to find out more about what our podcast is about and why we started, please listen to our introduction episode.
Today on this podcast, we have Erica Pong. Erica's a long-term friend of both Henry and I, and we met her on the badminton court with her egg-shaped racket. She went on to represent Australia in the World Junior Championships, Sudirman Cup, and Uber Cup finals. Off the court, Erica is a sports physiotherapist working in finance and is often found in activewear on the weekends. Thanks for being on the podcast, Erica.
Thanks for having me. Hey, guys.
Hi, Erica. So, wait a minute. Let's take a step back and go through something in that introduction that myself and probably people in our audience will not know about. Can you please tell me about this egg-shaped racket and how you met each other?
The egg-shaped racket is a racket shape that I've had since the very beginning of my badminton career. It's basically where my coach would somehow tension the racket so that it became more like an egg shape. So it was tapered at the top and wider at the bottom. And I really liked it, and I kept it all the way through while playing. And that's why Jeffrey mocks my egg-shaped racket.
So I'd often comment at the egginess of it because it literally just looked like an egg. It didn't look like a head of a badminton racket. Because it's an older racket, they didn't have the isometric shape of the head. Erica, what racket was it? It was a Carbonex, what?
21.
21.
I believe it may be the same vintage as me. It's a bit sad because I'm not sure that they make it anymore. They tried to do a remake of it and it was pretty good, but my mum, she knew I liked it and she doesn't like change, so she stocked up on a lot of Carbonex 21. And so, you know, after a bit of wear and tear, they would break and then my heart would break as well because it's so hard to get them, but they were so good. But every time, like, I'd meet new people or trying to get my racket strung at tournaments, I got a few comments about, you know, how old my racket was.
Can't believe you achieved so much with an egg head racket.
You're making me curious as to whether or not you still own this egg-shaped racket and you still use it when you play badminton.
I don't use it as much just because I'm really sad that if I break my last one, like, what would I do? So I still believe I still have one, like, tucked away at home somewhere, but I use a lot more of the newer rackets. But it's not quite the same. I like the softness of the Carbonex 21, and sometimes I have difficulties with the stiffness of some of the newer rackets.
So, Erica, moving on now from the egg-shaped racket. The first question we want to ask you today is a very simple question, and it's basically, when did you start playing badminton and how did you get into the sport?
I started badminton, I'd say, when I was 10, and it was pretty innocent. My mum loves badminton, and growing up, I don't think she had the chance to play it as much, so she enjoyed it as an adult, playing with friends and my brother and cousins. So I'd tag along. Actually, in the beginning, I'd just be really mopey and sad because I had no skills. No one wanted to play with me because I couldn't hit. So I kept going, and then slowly my mum just put me in a social coaching class, and then I really enjoyed it, and it just naturally kept going and going, and then enrolled into a competition. And I believe my first competition was at FIBA, and I barely knew how to serve, and I remembered getting yelled at on the side of the court trying to what to do, and I didn't even know what I was doing. And so that's where it all began.
Great. And just for the audience, that was all in Melbourne, wasn't it?
Yes, that was in Melbourne, down in a little suburb out east.
Just so, again, for our audience, what does SEBA stand for? And myself, actually.
I think it is Southeast Badminton Association.
Yeah. Okay.
In Springvale.
In Springvale,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, Erica, you were talking about how, you kept going when you weren't a very good player. There must have been something that drove you to continue playing badminton even though you weren't very good at it at the time. Is there something about the sport that you particularly loved or enjoyed when you were learning to play?
At the very beginning, I wasn't really sure what I was drawn to. I enjoyed learning a skill. I enjoyed mastering a skill. It's just fun, competing on court as well, and then being able to be taught like how to serve, and then you can actually serve. It's quite rewarding for your efforts. And I think I just continued. And then I think the other aspect that people love about sport is just meeting the friends and the people on the way. So going to the competitions, meeting people like you guys, and then, seeing them every day at training. It's a really good network. And I think that's really part of the reason why I enjoyed it. And then as I got older as well, like you get your goals, you want to win things. So that kept me in the sport as well. And there was a lot of opportunities from competing after that. Like you got to do a lot of traveling, see a bit of the world, see also some amazing other badminton players on the circuit, and it's quite inspiring. So I think that's what kept me going. And it wasn't something that I, thought so far ahead that's what I do. It just naturally rolled on to the next thing,
So after playing professionally and playing for Australia, now you're still playing socially, is that right?
Yeah, I play socially once a week. I'm now currently based in Sydney, so I play out west near Olympic Park now, just on a Sunday morning and a regular hit-up.
Cool. And that's for the social aspect. You still love to play, for the exercise. What part of it do you really love about it now when you're playing a bit more socially?
I do miss it sometimes when I don't play for a while. So I do enjoy going back to something that I spent so much of my life doing. There's a great bunch of people as well, good competition, good level as well. So I get a good workout, which is great because sometimes going to the gym gets a bit monotonous. Yeah, it's just fun getting into that mind on court as well. Like when you are facing a different opponent, it really makes you switch your head on and think about strategically what you're going to try and do, or, oh, I'm a bit slow lately, so I got to try something else to try and win the game. So I think part of that is my competitive streak, but there's nothing else during my day or in my life where I really get to use that type of thinking.
Yeah, it certainly sounds that you miss the competitive aspect of the sport, and that the social badminton still brings that out in you. Going back to competition and your more professional side of badminton during would it be 5 to 10 years ago?
I think it's around 10 years ago. It's a while.
Yeah. So thinking back to 10 years ago, what would you consider as your biggest or best badminton achievement, or even some of the best times that you've had playing badminton?
The best times? I think one of the best times, and one that was more memorable, even though it was such a small tournament, but winning like the Sudirman, which is like the nationals under 17 tournament in like Australia and New Zealand. But the very first time I won it, that was pretty special because I never thought I could ever win anything. I was always like the kid that was just taught to just try hard. Doesn't matter what happens as long as you played well and tried your best. So that was quite an experience. Like the year before, I got knocked down first round, and my goal that year was to just get past first round. And I think at the time, really no one really knew who I was. So winning that was kind of special. And the trophy was quite pretty. It was glass and I'd never seen it before. So I was quite happy.
Yeah, definitely. I know exactly how that feels. So, Erica, now switching more over to the main discussion of this podcast episode. So, just basically recapping on the story that I told about your introduction and your movement from badminton to your professional life. You trained and you worked as a physiotherapist. So you went to university, graduated as a physiotherapist, and now you're an investment banker. Can you give us a bit of a background as to your journey from when you first decided to be a physiotherapist, whether that being in high school or when you decided to actually study for physio, and how did you get to where you are now?
Okay, I'll start off with the chronological of that question. So I was interested in physio later in high school, around year 10. And that was because like you said, I was training, so I was quite a fidgety person. I wasn't one to sit down all day, even though it's ironic that I do that now. But at the time, I knew I liked to be a practical person and I enjoy helping people. It's really rewarding. And being an athlete, I was injured a fair bit, so I often saw my physio and that intrigued me and how it worked. And it seemed like something that I could do later on, in terms of lifestyle, and the type of work. So studied in year 12, went to uni, and at the time I was training, competing and going to uni, which has its own challenges. And through the people that I met during the time playing, and really where my interest was, I got a job as a physio and worked alongside a lot of athletes and also the weekend warrior athletes. So I got a lot of experience through there and used a lot of my badminton experience from competing to build a relationship and to also form the rehab plan with a lot of my athlete clients as well.
So, Erica, sorry to interrupt. So, for people who don't know, what's the weekend warrior?
The weekend warrior are people that, it's probably like us now. Like, you know, we don't play as much, but on the weekend you join like your soccer club, you join a league and you play once a week or so. So they're the weekend warriors that still try and be fit and do what they love, but you know, they've got a full-time job to keep as well.
Yeah, sure.
Please continue.
I worked as a physio for 4-5 years, and then I realized it wasn't quite where I wanted to be in the next 20 years or so. Really, from a career point of view, I still love seeing my clients and the relationship I had with them. But from a career progression point of view, something just didn't fit right. And I spent a long time sort of dealing with these emotions that weren't great. And there was probably 6-9 months of it where I just really wasn't sure what the next move was and just what was going on. So I took a bit of time there and just spoke to people around me and just did a lot of Googling as well, seeing what I actually want to do. And what I liked in the physio aspect was I worked a lot in private practice, so I enjoyed building the business and other administrative things like that. So I went back to uni and then viewed my resources that was available to me there, like the different networking events and the career mentoring programs that was available. And then I decided that I wanted to go into banking because that seemed interesting. And luckily, someone wanted to hire me, and here I am.
So what did you go back and study when you went back to university?
When I went back to uni, I studied a Master's of Management and Finance. So that was done at University of Melbourne, and it was great. It had lots of broad subjects. I got to do a short placement over in Shanghai. So it had a lot of good opportunities, and it really suited to my need of what I want to do to study and then get that opportunity to then make that career jump.
And as far as I'm aware, as soon as you graduated or got your master's, you got a job virtually straight away, didn't you?
Yeah. So for those people that are in that corporate world or are studying, like internships are pretty important in terms of getting a name on your resume, just getting your foot in the door really is the biggest thing. Being a 2-year degree, I got on that pretty quick and just applied straight away. And luckily I sought an internship, and then that led to an offer afterwards.
Yeah, and I suppose now you've got that career progression that you've been looking for as well. I want to just jump back a little bit and go back to the period where you had to process that transition, because I'm sure there are some people that might be listening that might think that whatever they're doing at the time is not what they want to do for the rest of their lives as well. And I want to go back to how you were feeling at the time and the sort of the questions that you were asking yourself during that 6 to 9 months where you were juggling whether or not you should pursue this transition. So how did you make that first step? What was on your mind at the time?
What was on my mind was that feeling of like I would really hate to be stuck in this forever. What pushed me to make the jump wasn't so much, this is great, there's something greener on the other side, but it was, I can't do this forever. I'm going to lose my sanity if I keep doing this. And I think I went through the what do I want to do for the rest of my life phase a bit later than most. I think a lot of people may have delved into that earlier on, like during year 12. And it is a tough question, asking what do you want to do for the rest of like the next 20, 30 years, and you got to make that now. I mean, did you guys know what you wanted to do when you were 18 or 25?
It's a funny story because when you talk to myself or Henry or you, Erica, we all have similar stories because we have actually transitioned out of our main profession that we studied in. So I'm still in dentistry, but I'm no longer doing full-time clinical hours. And I was looking for those answers to the questions that you asked as well. The questions that I asked myself were very similar in that I was saying, do I see myself here in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? Is this what I really, truly want to be doing? And I guess it comes down to the two motivating factors for most people. It's either you move towards pleasure or you move away from pain. And like yourself, mine was more about the pain and thinking, if I stay stagnant right here, I can predict where I'm going to be later on, but am I going to be truly fulfilled? And the answer was no. And that's the way that I found that I needed to make a change. In terms of knowing what to do for the rest of your life, I thought that I wanted to be an orthodontist. And I was pretty sure of that when I was maybe 15 years old. But what I'd like to let you know and let people listening know is that even if you have decided once, it doesn't mean you're locked in stone, and you can decide again later.
I couldn't put it in any better words than that, Jeff, to be honest. I had a very similar story, and obviously I had studied veterinary medicine and I'm no longer a veterinarian. I work in supply chain management now. And so I too have had those questions come into my mind for a long period. And even shortly after completing university, I already kind of knew and felt that being a veterinarian was not going to be a long-term thing for me, regardless of where I think I'm going to be in 5, 10, 20 years in the future. I feel like it's something that we shouldn't really be fixated on as well. So I'm glad that you, Erica, and Jeff have been able to transition into something that you're more interested in and hopefully more fulfilling for the both of you. I want to, I guess, talk about that period again when you were making that decision, and you talked about speaking to people around you. How did the people around you treat your change, your decision to change? Were they supportive?
I think I was quite lucky. Like my parents were quite supportive, easy going. Most people that hear when I say I made a career jump, I'm thinking like, they're like, whoa, what? Like, cause it's just so different. And so, yeah, I was quite lucky. My parents were so supportive, and my partner was so supportive because I swear out every day I was like, what do I do? And he was like, I don't know, you have to decide. It was really great that I had those people around me and my friends were understanding. It also helped that, like, I'm grateful that I was financially able to go back to study. And I did work while I was studying, I must say. So yeah, the people around me were great. And I think going back to what you both said as well, like, actually it made me realize us three, we studied something that's so specific. Like, it's a course that you study, and when you come out of it, that's what you become. And what I found interesting in this career changing progress is that none of the things that I learned or developed when I was working as a physio, that didn't go to waste. It was defining for me because I built my brand, but those skills working with the clients, like building that rapport and building the trust and just learning how to manage the clients as well, you know, because when people are in pain or the pets aren't feeling well, people are distressed. So those skills that came through with that really helped me also make that change and land and a job essentially.
Yeah, Erica, just going back to your point about the people around you and the people being supportive, like your family and your friends and things like that. One of the things that I battled with when I made my decision was that a lot of people would judge me based on the decision. And what I actually found, which was really refreshing, was that when I actually told people of my decision, the ratio of people who reacted positively compared to negatively was much higher than I thought it would be. I thought people would ridicule and judge and say, why are you doing this? That's stupid. And of course, there were some people who said similar things like that. But the vast majority of people were actually congratulating. Well done. You're so brave. You're making this choice. I wish you all the best. And it was completely opposite to what I actually thought it would be like. Did you experience anything like that?
Yeah, I think at first it was that, oh wow. And then once I explained it, like just the way you said it, like they were like, oh great, good for you. So I think that sort of won them over. But I feel like maybe that's what everyone secretly wants to do. Like, we're actually doing what they're thinking. Because yeah, I think there are, like, the burnout rate in physio is quite high. So quite a few of my peers have moved on, and there is that sort of camaraderie, if I can say, of people that have moved away from, like, physio, because we've all had to have that same mindset to jump. And I think people that stay, they're like, oh, you're leaving us kind of thing.
So what I experienced was there were two types of dentists, or not two, but there were dentists who really loved what they do. And I have some colleagues, some really good friends that they just love dentistry. They love everything about teeth. They love everything about the treatment of the teeth. And they're really fixated on that. And part of me, when I made my choice, I was actually a little bit jealous of them. And I thought, I studied this for so long. I had everything planned out. I had my own dental practice, everything like that. Why can't I just like it as much as them? Because they're going so well and they love it and they're getting better and better. And I felt kind of guilty that I didn't like it as much as them. That's how I felt. And I feel that in every profession, there are always going to be those people who just truly love it for what it is, and good on them. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Stay there. We need you in those positions, living your passion. And then there's other people who feel that, hey, what else is there? What else can I do? And I guess the whole crux of this episode here is trying to get people to own that feeling, be brave enough to say, hey, that's actually how I feel. What am I going to do about it to actually make my situation better?
And I'm not sure if you've experienced it as well, but since moving on, so there's the people that, you know, I were talking to about my move, but now that I've actually made the jump, then, you know, obviously there's the, oh, where are you from? What did you study? You know, the networking questions that everybody gets. So they're like, oh, what did you study? I'm like, oh, physio. And they're like, oh, so like I explained that to them. Like, there's that newer level of respect that I had the courage to make that jump and to take that risk. Have you experienced that, or is it just me?
No, it's definitely not just you. Certainly in my career jump, I've certainly experienced that because it's kind of like an X factor. It's you start a conversation, or they start a conversation with you thinking it's going to head in a very, I guess, a conventional way. They're kind of expecting you to respond with, yeah, if, for example, for me, some form of business management or accounting or something like that. And then all of a sudden it's, I worked in clinical practice as a veterinarian for 5 years. It's very different. And a lot of them are a lot of people that I've met after changing careers, they kind of get taken aback by it. And it makes the conversation very interesting, actually. But yeah, going back to jumping and transitioning from your previous career to your new career, I think it takes a certain type of character, and it's surprising that us three have all done the same sort of thing. I think it's the want or need to progress is what pushes us away from the very specialized career pathways. And it's not that people can't develop or progress being a dentist or being a physio or being a veterinarian. It's just the want or need to do that. And I guess for us three, and I don't want to speak for us three, but I guess for me personally, I just didn't really find it fulfilling to develop in that sense. So that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to move on and develop differently. But for you, Erica, I want to talk about you and coming back to you because this podcast is about you. So how did badminton or sport in general help you on that journey?
Well, it helps so many ways. Like you said, it makes the conversation interesting. But there's that mentality when you train that you have a competition going up. You got to train. That's your next goal. You got to perfect the skill. These are these things. So in terms of progressing career, like that mindset kicks in, like you got to study hard, you've got certain tests, you got to maintain your WAM pretty good if you want to apply for a job a certain time. And that continues the same afterwards, like, you want to get a promotion. So these are all these people that you need to manage as stakeholders and all these goals you need to meet in terms of performance as well. So I think that being in that mindset from very early on and knowing how to manage time, like trying to study and compete when I was younger, that helps me manage time now as an adult as well. And like you go to interviews, you meet people and they're like, oh, why do you think we should hire you? And you can say a lot of generic things and write a lot of generic things like, oh, I work hard, I'm competitive, and things like that. But there's nothing more interesting for them as an interviewer or someone employing you. And there's nothing that actually proves that you are than saying that, I used to go to training at 6 a.m. and then I'd go to lectures at 9 a.m. to like 3 p.m. and then I'd hit another training session and then I'd study. Like that itself demonstrates the type of person you are. And I think that's the part of badminton that became part of me without me realizing.
Yeah, and I think from the audience perspective, even if they're not doing all those sessions and not doing training, but if they're involved in their local social club, they're organizing some tournaments to play in, just those extra little things where you can demonstrate teamwork, you can demonstrate doing something outside work, managing time, achieving goals, even if your personal goals aren't as high as playing for the country, it can still demonstrate real character when you go into the workplace as well. So, Erica, moving on from your story and all the great things that you've done, if there's someone in the audience or someone who's listening to this episode and they're considering changing their industry or what they're actually doing, what do you think that they need to hear? And why would they need to hear it? Do they need to hear something in particular to help them on their way? Is there something that you can provide them just for a bit of reassurance or a bit of motivational inspiration?
A piece of advice that my mentor gave to me when I was a physio is to care less. And it sounds really rude and blunt, but it was a really great piece of advice because I'm quite self-conscious and I tend to think a bit too much about how others may perceive me. But what I found about caring less is to not get spiraled up in things that don't matter and ultimately aren't beneficial for me. So my advice would be to care less about what other people want of you or what they think is correct, and to just follow what you think is true to you, what would bring you happiness. And that doesn't mean that you should just really do whatever and go crazy. I mean, maybe that's right for you, but what I found helpful was to put away emotions that were negative but not useful, and to do my own research and due diligence on what was right for me. And I did that by speaking to a lot of people, people in the industry I wanted to go into, and friends that are in similar industry or have been working for a few years, just to get their point of view on it. So I think letting go about social perceptions and things that we were kind of conditioned into thinking when we were younger, like what Henry said about, you should go study and do this for the rest of your life. Like, really, that doesn't matter. Like, if you're happy doing what you can do, you're going to be great at it. And that's what really matters.
I can really resonate with what you said about the perceptions of other people, because coming back to what I said earlier, sometimes our perceptions of what we think other people will actually think are incorrect. So my perception was people would ridicule me and tear me down when I said I wanted to change. But that wasn't actually a fact. That was just a story that was made up in my head. So I think one of the main things that could be holding someone back is that they think there's going to be all these repercussions, people are going to be upset with them, etc. But that's just a story that they're telling themselves, and that's holding them back from the decision, when that may not actually be true. It's probably unlikely that it's going to be true that everyone's actually ridiculing you, because the people that you care about the most and care about you will eventually be supportive and come around.
Yeah, totally. And I think that it's okay to have, like, you're not going to be able to be like, oh, I don't want to do this, and the next day be like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. There's just going to be that period of time where you need to figure it out, and having that period to properly figure it out and actually discover a bit more about yourself, it just allows you to be more sure of the decision you're going to go into. And I think, don't feel like you're wasting your life or time in that period. Like, it's a really important period.
Yeah, and I really want to stick to that for a moment, Erica, because when you say care less, I think it's important for our audience to interpret it in the right way as well. Because care less doesn't mean don't care. Like, still care. Like, absolutely still care about the things that you want to care about. It's more about caring about potentially other people's judgment of you. And that's how I interpret it. And the other thing about that is that, no one thinking, like, caring that much about you in the same way that you care about yourself. So you might be thinking that, people are going to think of me in this certain way, but really they're busy thinking about what others are thinking of them. So I think it's important to interpret care less, not in the sort of the rude, I don't care about you kind of way, but to worry less about other people's potential judgment of you, because chances are they're not even thinking about it.
Exactly. And you know what? Like, you have to put up with yourself. So that's what matters.
So, Erica, we've had a pretty long discussion about this, and just wrapping up here, we always want to leave the people listening to this podcast with a few action steps as to what they can implement straight away in their lives and see benefits from. So, out of everything we've discussed, what would you say are 2 to 3 take-home pieces of advice or actions or tips you'd give someone who's listening to this podcast?
I would say take a moment in your day to not do anything and just sort of recap where you are in your life. Is it where you're going? Is it what you want to do? Because a lot of people say, I'm too busy, as a way, as an excuse, and also to stop that thought or conversation of the real things that matter. So I think the audience, you should take 10 minutes at least, the very minimum, and just do nothing and just think about, are you really happy at the moment? That's my takeaway.
Thanks, Erica. That's a really great piece of advice. And it reminds me of something that I heard very recently. You don't get the gold without the dragon. I think it's important, as you said, to take the time to reevaluate. And it might be uncomfortable, but it's usually those things that are uncomfortable that really make us grow as people. Erica, thanks so much for coming onto this podcast. It has been so enjoyable, and I certainly have learned a lot as well.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be invited to this podcast and to speak about things that a lot of people don't get to openly speak about. So I look forward to what's next for Volant, and also hopefully women's gear. Let me know when that comes out.
Thank you. Yes, we'll certainly let you know. I want to finish off by letting our audience know what I and Jeff took away from this podcast, or what the key takeaway for me was. And that was to take some time in your day to stop, do nothing, and just look back at where you've come from, where you want to go, and where you're at now. Because you might find that one day that your time is up and you've forgotten to actually take, that 5 minutes, that 10 minutes per day to just reevaluate and see if where you're heading is where you actually want to go.
I think that's really important, and it's just a huge thing that can change your mindset and change the understanding of yourself just within that 5 to 10 minutes per day. As for the key takeaway for me, it's something that I've spoken about a few times, and it's the fact that a lot of us will hold ourselves back because we think or perceive that someone on the outside is going to judge us for making the decision. So my key takeaway is, if you're going to be held back by someone, you may as well just hold yourself back. Don't let someone else's opinions or your perceived opinions of them be the thing that holds you back. If you're going to be held back, make the choice on your own terms. So thanks for tuning into the Badminton Podcast. We'll continue to push you to grow both as a player and as a person in all aspects of your life by inviting special guests like Erica Pong onto the show. Make sure that you keep sharing your love for the sport with everyone you know, so that we can truly show the world how incredible badminton is.
And if you want to connect with us, you can connect with us via our social media handle, Volantwear, VOLANTWEAR, on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as on our website, www.volantwear.com.
This podcast was brought to you by Volantwear, the most versatile badminton apparel you'll ever own.